The 3DS and Wii U eShops have been kinda dead for a while now. It's a shame, because there are some amazing games on the platform. I'm really hoping the next Nintendo system is a DS-style Switch that makes all the 3DS and DS games officially playable again. But until we know about the future of Nintendo, let's talk about the past. Today, I'll be sharing my top 10 Nintendo 3DS games. There will be some spoilers for some of the games on this list, especially number 9. So make sure to check the timestamps in the description to avoid spoilers for games you don't want to have spoiled. Now then, on to the list. At number 10, I put Metroid: Samus Returns. This was the first Metroid game I'd ever played, and it's a really good one. I don't know much about the original Metroid 2, just that the Game Boy really held it back from its full potential. Samus Returns, on the other hand, is not burdened by the Game Boy, its tiny screen, and the lack of a map, as the 3DS, especially on XL, gives it much more room to work with, as well as a bottom screen actually giving you a map. It also introduced the counter mechanic, giving Samus the ability to block certain attacks and fire a charge shot that takes out most enemies. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really have much else to say about this game other than it's good. It's just a really good 2D Metroid. I'm still fairly new to the Dragon Quest series. I recently played through 11 on Switch, which was fantastic. Over on the 3DS, Dragon Quest VIII is considered one of the best and most ambitious RPGs on the platform. And I still haven't played it. I only started getting interested into Dragon Quest after the Switch came out, and 8 had already started to become hard to find. For a reasonable price. It sucks because I remember seeing a copy of the game at a Walmart a year before I went back to find no Dragon Quest VIIIs on the shelf. But there were copies of Dragon Quest VII, my number 9 on this list. Dragon Quest VII is a solid RPG. It has your standard turn-based combat, and after a certain point in the game, and this took a bit longer than I would have liked in my opinion, you can give your party members new classes to make them stronger. To unlock higher rank classes, you actually need each character to master usually 2 or more classes from the previous rank. It's a pretty neat mechanic that incentivizes you to try out multiple classes on multiple characters. I also find the game's story premise to be pretty interesting. Your hero and your childhood friends, Maribel and Prince Kiefer, discover a tomb filled with broken tablets you need to fix in order to go to certain areas in the past to fix issues in the present day. Each area you go to has a unique story, each with its own problem that your party has to fix. There are some criticisms I have to bring up, mainly with the party members. As characters, they're all pretty boring. Nobody really stands out, they're just there. The only one I kinda liked was Kiefer, and it wasn't until he left the party that I did. Him staying in the past to be with his girl he likes, and to free himself from his duties as prince so he can freely go on adventures as he pleases, is a pretty good conclusion to his character. It's also a pretty tragic thing for our silent, unfeeling protagonist, in theory. His best friend is now dead in the present day. His descendant does join your party way late into the game, and honestly I didn't care for her either. The most disappointing party member though was Mervyn. When they said I had to reawaken a legendary hero from the past, I thought it was gonna be Kiefer, but it was just some guy. Oh yeah, one other thing. You have 4 party member slots to use at a time, okay? And for a big portion of the game, you only have 3. You start with the hero, Maribel and Kiefer, then Ruff joins to make 4, then Kiefer dips, and it's a while before you get Mervyn. Then Aisha joins the party as the 5th and final party member. Yeah, you can only use 4 at a time, and you cap at 5, so only 1 member can be swapped out. So why even have 5 at that point? I guess it's not that big of a deal, especially since Maribel leaves your party for a while near the end game, which really sucked for me because she was my main magic user, and when she rejoined, her class was lower ranked than all my other characters, so I had to do more grinding to catch her up. Yay. You know, this was something I noticed in the last top 10. Despite me ranking these games as some of my favorites, I still tend to have a lot of bad to say about them. I guess it just means the good parts of the game are good enough to outweigh all the negatives. So here's 2 more good things to end this part. The message Kiefer leaves you at the end of the game made me feel a twang of emotion because it was sad. And boomerang weapons hitting every enemy without using MP for a spell was great. I love not using MP in items at random enemies. Only bosses get that privilege. For my number 8 pick, I'm putting The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Now my first gaming system was the Game Boy Advance SP. A large chunk of its library was NES and SNES ports. My first Zelda game was A Link to the Past. Not the first I finished, but the first I played. I actually didn't finish that game until Nintendo Switch Online. Even still, I have some nostalgia to it, and playing through A Link Between Worlds definitely hit me right in the childhood when I was starting to play it. Just like its predecessor, it's a great 2D Zelda. It's almost a precursor to Breath of the Wild since you can do a lot of the low roll dungeons in any order. Mainly due to the fact that you can get the items in any order from Ravio, who lets you rent them until you die. Now, I don't think I ever died with rental items. I was able to outright buy them before I started dying, which you can do that too. Overall, it's a really good 2D Zelda, and if you like A Link to the Past, you'll like this one too. At number 7, we have the underrated and overlooked gem that is codenamed Steam. This is a turn-based strategy game developed by Intelligent Systems of Fire Emblem and Paper Mario fame, where you play as characters from American history and literature that form a team armed with steam-powered gadgets and weapons to fight aliens. If that ain't a wacky-ass premise, I don't know what is. This is a really fun and kind of challenging strategy game. Each character has a meter showing how much steam they have, determining how far they can move, how many shots they have, each weapon uses a different amount of steam, and if you can attack first on the enemy's turn if they get too close. It has a really cool aesthetic for the visuals, kind of comic book style, and a lot of great level designs. The characters themselves all have some pretty unique mechanics and weapons. Oh yeah, and did I mention the leader is President Abraham Lincoln? Did I also mention there are levels where you play as Lincoln piloting a giant Abe Lincoln mech? No? Well, I mentioned it now. This game is just insane, but also really fun. For my number 6 pick, I have Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia. This was the more overlooked Fire Emblem on 3DS, as it was a remake of an older game, and it was on 3DS when the Switch had already launched. Of course, I didn't have a Switch yet, so it was no bother to me. People also criticized the lack of a weapon triangle in this game, but if you ask me, the weapon triangle, at least from the 3DS onward, because that's all I played of the series so far, didn't really matter that much until Engage. If you make your character strong enough, weapon triangle doesn't mean jack. Well, maybe if I played on Lunatic it might. I should try that one day. Also, since it was an older game, most newer fans found it too hard. Bitch, there's still casual mode, you'll be fine. I honestly didn't find any of these things a problem in the game. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I love some of the gameplay elements added to this one. You can actually explore dungeons and find enemies that when you walk up to them initiate a battle. You can even hit them first so they start the battle weakened. While fighting in a dungeon, your characters get tired and you have to feed them to keep their stamina up. You can also find items and weapons to give your units, which you can also find in some towns you can explore from what I remember. It's been a while. Oh, and one of my favorite things in this game that I appreciate way more now, especially after Engage, is the fact that you get to use all your party members in every map until the final boss and postgame. And let me also add that this was the first game to give you the ability to rewind back to a previous turn, in case your unit died or a turn just didn't go how you wanted it to go. Not only that, but it was the first game to have full voice acting, not just for the main story, but in supports as well. Now, I honestly don't remember the story too well, but I remember it was good, so that's a plus. Overall, a great Fire Emblem game. Also, Maya's best girl, Bowie, I will fight you for her. My number 5 pick is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. I already mentioned I started with the GBA, and I'd also like to mention my first home console was the Wii. As a kid, I didn't know about the Wii shop, and as an older kid, I barely knew about the Wii U and 3DS eShop. My parents sure as hell didn't know about it, so all my games were bought in store, physical copies, which is the best way to get them anyway. As a result, I have never played any Nintendo 64 games, and I probably won't for a while as I have no intention of getting the Switch Online expansion pass. However, I have played a handful of remakes of 64 games, and Ocarina of Time 3D is one of them. It's a really good one too. The original was the first 3D Zelda, and is considered by many as one of, if not the best Zelda game. I can see why. The 3DS version is also a really good game. I personally wouldn't rank it as my favorite, but it is a really good time. Its combat is great, and its dungeons are great. I've also heard this game has a great story, and no. It's not bad necessarily, but it's not spectacular. It's just basic. I remember getting kinda disappointed by that part of the game because of how many people online hyped it up back then. Not to mention I had read the manga prior to playing the game, which definitely added some more depth to it. I mean, it was a book, not a game, so it kinda had to do that as it didn't have any gameplay to make it fun. So they added to its story, and man, that subplot with the dragon, that was something else. They really made you feel bad for a random boss in the game. Either way, Ocarina of Time 3D is a great Zelda game and will give you a really good time. Ironically, my number 4 pick is a tie between, well, 4 games. that being Pokemon Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon. I've mentioned before I'm more a fan of the DS and to some extent the Game Boy Advance era of Pokemon, which was prior to EXP share making it easy to overlevel in these games. I've also started to miss the top-down view and the pixel style, and overall 3D Pokemon just hasn't been as fun for me. Yet somehow, Gen 7 manages to keep my interest. More so than other 3D Pokemon games. I feel like a lot more recent 3D Pokemon have tried to change the formula in ways that didn't really appeal to me, though they might have if they were done differently. Scarlet and Violet's open world would have been great if the trainer's level scaled to my progression, so I'm not going one way and then I go the other way and I'm fighting level 10 Pokemon with my level 30s. Then Legends Arceus focused more on catching Pokemon and had very few trainer battles, which was always my favorite part of Pokemon. Gen 7 changed things by simply replacing gyms with trials. Instead of fighting a gym leader, you fight a totem Pokemon. This was probably my favorite change. Now, I'm in agreement with people who say newer Pokemon games are too easy. Yes, older games are pretty easy too, now that we're adults, but the newer ones are just too easy. The modern EXP share just makes it so you'll be over-leveled the whole game. Older games were balanced around only one Pokemon leveling up at a time. If the newer games did a better job taking into account the new EXP system, we could have a more balanced experience. We could actually be lower level than the champion like in older games. Now Gen 7 still had this problem, but it did have a light solution. In most RPGs, boss enemies have boosted stats, so even if you are a little over leveled, they can still pose a challenge. The totem Pokemon are essentially just that, enemies with boosted stats. On top of that, they can summon an ally to make the battle a 2v1 against you. If you're not careful, some of these fights can be difficult, especially Lurantis. Heck, in the original game, the final fight with Lusamine, she had a whole team of Pokemon with boosted stats. Honestly, that feature makes the Alola games my favorite 3D Pokemon games. It was such a good feature to actually give a bit more challenge to a EXP all Pokemon game. I do see Pokemon trying to do this again in newer games, actually trying to make RPG bosses in their RPGs, and not really doing it as well if you ask me. I mean, Giratina in Legends was okay, but it mainly went for the shock value of multiple phases instead of giving Giratina boosted stats, so Oh, I guess I should mention why both SM and Usum are tied now. There's just stuff I like in the originals more than the Ultras, and there are things I like more in the Ultras than the originals, so overall they just tie for me there. For number 3, we have Kid Icarus Uprising. Now, a lot of people say this game's controls are kinda awkward, but to be honest, it never bothered me. For some reason, aiming with the bottom screen to hit something on the top screen just made sense to me. It was never confusing. If you're like me and don't mind the controls, then you're gonna have a great time with this game. It's such a fun action game, with really good visuals for a 3DS game, with some great character and world designs. It's actually got a lot of great voice acting in it, and some of the most charming and likable characters around. You'd think a game where 2 or more characters are constantly yapping while you play would get annoying, but no. These are just so much fun and contain some of the goofiest conversations that you're just entertained the whole time. I didn't even get distracted by them. Even though I was actively trying to listen to them while playing the game, I was still able to play without accidentally getting hit or dying. This game is absolutely fantastic. It sure would be nice if someone could make an HD remake for Switch, but as far as 3DS games go, it's one of the best. At number 2, it shouldn't be a shock, it's Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. If you watch my top 10 Switch games, you already know. I love this game. I love the exploration, combat, music, story, and characters. It's just a fantastic RPG. The Switch version does make this one obsolete, but it's still good regardless. The only real enhancement in the Definitive Edition is the visuals, which, yeah, the 3DS game and the Wii game, which I never played, are pretty ugly. Either way, still one of the best RPGs out there, even on 3DS. Well, new 3DS specifically. Finally, my number 1 pick is Fire Emblem Awakening. When I played this game, all I knew about Fire Emblem was that it was an RPG and it had characters in Smash Bros. I really wanted to try more RPGs after growing up playing Pokemon. I actually got Awakening sometime after Corrin got added to Smash. I figured I'd play Awakening before Fates. Now, all I knew about RPGs at the time was turn-based combat and leveling up. A strategy game wasn't a thing I really knew about. When I saw the gameplay, I thought, will I like this? Guess what? I liked it. This is probably still my favorite Fire Emblem game. It just feels the most straightforward, making it more replayable to me. Just like any other FE, it's got plenty of characters you can make absolutely busted, making it satisfying to see them mow down enemies. Oh, and a lot of the characters in the game are just very likable characters. Henry's my favorite.
Have some death! I'm gonna kill you!
I feel like it's hard to go into detail about why I like this game, since anything I can say about this game, I can really say about any Fire Emblem. It's just the simplicity. It feels like the core of every Fire Emblem that came after it. It doesn't really have any gimmicks to it, unless you count the romance and child units, but that's also in Fates. I know when I play Awakening, I'm just gonna have a good time. There's no point in the game where I feel like it just stops being fun. There's nothing I can really complain about. Except censoring Tharja's butt in the DLC in the US. I paid for it, gimme that butt! I gotta say, I had a bit more variety when it came to 3DS games over Switch games. I don't know if that's more telling on how good the library of 3DS is, or how good specific series are on Switch. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this video. Please leave a like, share your own 3DS lists in the comments, and hit that subscribe button to see any other potential top 10s, or other videos I do. Until next time, this is the first one, signing out. Bye bye!